Struggle to get here. We start without him, but we also have a very tight time schedule. So I'll put Greg in after him, Matthew. So hoping that he'll be able to join us. Okay. I think I'll start now. While I'm doing my short presentation, Michele Partiano from Access Impact and Boulder that are working together on the Rion platform that all of you are acquainted with, I hope. He will show you a little bit how you can actually utilize this platform. And we also hope that the AI agents of some of the speakers on the panel, by the time we end this session, they would actually have started to communicate with each other and maybe find common ground. At least that's what we hope. So let me start then. Yeah, everything's fine, Frederica? Can start? Okay, great. Okay, good morning everyone, and a warm welcome to our session on innovative supply chains. It's a pleasure to see such a diverse group of practitioners, investors, international organizations and entrepreneurs gathered here at the Hotel Business School ESL for our 8th SIIA Impact Summit. Before we dive into the discussion, let me briefly frame this conversation. Over the past weeks, as I said, thanks to our AI-powered pre-engagement tool on the Rion platform, we have clustered insight from participants. These show strong alignment around 3 key drivers: de-risking investment in fragile and underdeveloped supply chains, reimagining innovation from pharmaceuticals and agriculture to conflict minerals and sustainable aquaculture, and blended capital solutions where public and private and catalytic finance meet to unlock opportunities. So our guiding question for this session is, how do we de-risk and reimagine supply chains with blended capital and innovation? We'll hear from corporates operating in fragile contexts, international organizations shaping enabling environments, and impact investors providing catalytic capital. Each will bring not only their experience, but also concrete examples of what works and what doesn't work. By the end of the session, our goal is to crystallize actionable takeaways, pathways to collaboration, strategies to mobilize blended capital, and innovation that can scale across Africa and beyond. Finally, let me remind you that this is an interactive exchange. Our session is not about abstract concepts, but about concrete partnerships. So please think of how your own expertise connect with what is being shared and how we can collectively build resilient, inclusive, and sustainable supply chains. With that, let's get started. So before I hand over to our first speaker, let me emphasize one important element of the summit at SIIA. We believe that connections don't stop at the end of this panel. This is why, as I said before, each of the participants, they have their own profile and their own AI agent on the Rion platform. So rather than me reading out their long, impressive bios of our speakers today, they will briefly introduce themselves and then go straight into the insights that they want to share with you today. Meanwhile, if you haven't yet, I encourage you to reach out to your own AI agent on the platform. That's where you will be able to explore their background of the speakers, the projects, the companies, and potential opportunities for collaboration or partnership in more detail before, during, and after this session. With that, it's my pleasure to invite our first speaker from the International Trade Center, Sadiq Said, to open this conversation. Sadiq, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christian. So I get to speak from here. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having us here. I'm Sadiq Sayed. I'm from the International Trade Center. International Trade Center, it's not a financing institution. It's a United Nations agency. We are a joint agency of the United Nations and World Trade Organization based in Geneva. And we've been there for 65 years now. And our work is really economic empowerment, trade development, and market access. We work with developing countries, small communities, increasing their market access and then linking them to markets in order to get economic development. But what we are also doing is actually working with investors, and that's why we are invited here, and helping them de-risk their investments. So I will not go into many details, but maybe just through an example of one of our projects, I would like to show how we could work together, how the impact can happen on the ground. And maybe, this morning I heard about humanitarian agencies, some familiar language about log frames and development work, SDGs. But maybe from an example we have, we can see how investment and development can work together and find the real impact on the ground. Nira, maybe. So, yeah. The previous one? Okay, so everybody knows what this is? Yes, thank you. So that's good. We have a, okay, Nira, maybe next one. So this is about coffee. So International Trade Center, we work in many sectors, many value chains, but then one example from coffee. Coffee generally is grown in really beautiful environments and really nice mountains, and then by nature, it's grown with other trees in the forests, here in this case in the rainforest. But in beautiful regions also means many times in really remote areas, and in with remote communities growing there. And often small farmers who are growing this, they are really far from the markets, far from everything. So far from big cities, far from hospital facilities, medical facilities, education, but even from a decent road. So they are there, and basically dependent on local traders who can come pick their coffee, not very frequently, and then they just get the value what they can. So what we are trying to do basically is working with these farmers. Maybe they were, thank you. So here, this is in DR Congo, where we are working very closely. So often I ask people, you're so remote, and then with all these difficulties, why do you still want to work in coffee? So often the answer I get is, yes, okay, we get $1 for that, we get some foreign currency, but how much is the question? But apart from that, also coffee is a sector where actually it blends in well. It helps also in certain areas in reforestation, also in terms of multi-cropping, and intercropping with other cash crops and other products that they could use immediately. And it does have potential to give impact when you work throughout the value chain correctly. So in DR Congo, we are working in the west part of the country, in a region called Lukula, which is about 15 hours away from the capital, Kinshasa. Coffee used to be grown there historically, but since last 30 years it has been going down for the reasons I mentioned. But we found a particular variety of coffee which has good potential, and it has good potential to enter into specialty markets, high value markets, and bring that value to the farmers and bring the value to the origin. So here, currently we are working with about 60 villages with 3,000 farmers, and in the past 3 years we've been able to plant 2.7 million coffee trees. Apart from that, we are working with them also on adding value at the origin. So usually what happens is people buy, when the international buyer buys coffee, he just buys the cherry, so not really even the coffee bean or the dry product. So the farmer, many farmers I have met, they have not even actually tasted their own coffee. So this is the thing we are trying to change on the ground, where we actually make them appreciate their coffee, try to do the process on the farm itself, so they could get a bit more of the dollar value for their coffee. So for the coffee bean itself instead of the berry. So we are doing value addition on the ground, and then we are working with the local actors. So maybe next slide, just so well, this is just a classic coffee value chain. You have the farmer, you have a local processor, then you have an exporter, then of course they have an importing market. People roast it here, you add value here, you're marketing here, and then of course the coffee is sold where the market is. But we are also trying to disrupt this value chain, increase local consumption. So the value of the coffee is stayed there, but people are processing, people are roasting. But then we are also working with local exporters who are working hand in hand with the farmers, and they are sharing the value of the export with the farmers. Yes, so basically after 3 years, we can confidently say some of the impact we have seen on the ground is really the farmers, they have got actually double the price of the sale value of their coffee from what they were getting before. Then new generation planters who are in the coffee business, so that creates employment. And then of course with the coffee, we help them grow with other crops, so we do intercropping. So they have, coffee is a seasonal product, so you get it once a year. But then you have other products that can actually grow immediately, give them food, give them immediate income in the local markets. And then of course, they're improving their own facilities. People who would before walk to nearby towns with heavy bags, they have their own motorbikes, and there are other processing facilities that are improving. But this also generates a lot of interest in the markets. So now you have local private sector that is investing in the region, which was not the case before. And the local authorities are also taking note of this, and they are also trying to invest in the region. And basically this also affects the policy at the national level. Yes. So basically that's what we are doing in terms of the agriculture value chain, in terms of market, in terms of working with small producers, with processors, and with the value chain. But we also have tried to link all this with investors, and so we work on both sides. We work with the investors and look at their interest in which market they are working in, and where we have the projects, we could actually work in kind of blended financing. But we are also working actually primarily with the investment seekers in the countries where we are working on, and helping them actually prepare themselves for financing, but also working with them to making a deal. And then of course, once the deal happens, then we continue to work with them to make sure that their businesses are profitable, and then they not only bring impact to the investors, but they also bring some good profits. Maybe I will stop there, and if you want to just show ITC for the next slide. Yeah, so that's basically about ITC. So people who don't know ITC, we are based in Geneva, and we work in about 134 countries. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much, Sadiq, for those insights. We now turn to the corporate case studies. 3 very different but equally inspiring examples of how companies are innovating to reimagine supply chains in fragile and complex environments. As with all our speakers, their full profiles are available on the own platform that Michele next to me is managing. So I won't go into their long CVs. They will each briefly introduce themselves, pitch their solution, and share what they're hoping to get out of the session. While they speak, I encourage you to connect with their AI agents on their own platform for a deeper dive into their projects or companies to explore possibilities of partnerships, opportunity. So let's begin with Roland Decobert of Pharmakina and DRC, who will speak about how resilient pharmaceutical supply chains can be built even in fragile contexts such as DRC, and what support is needed to scale local drug manufacturing.
Thanks, Christian. Can you hear me? No? Can you hear me? Yeah. Maybe just a quick intro regarding, we talked a lot about terms, and as we say in French, il y a à boire et à manger, meaning that you can understand very different things. So let me give you my very selfish personal understanding, and then you will understand where I come from. First of all, regarding investments, let's put things in perspective. What Africa needs, desperately needs, is private investments. There's more than enough development aid money, and trust me, you don't want me to get there because that's going to be a very provocative debate about development aid. But just let me give you this number. According to the United Nations, there's a total of $40 billion being basically spent, invested, whatever, into sub-Saharan Africa on a yearly basis for the last 30 years. 40 billion a year. Private equity investment in Africa is 5 billion. There's almost a ratio from 1 to 9 between public investments, or most of it grants, not only, or loans, but which will never be paid back, and private investments. So Africa has more than enough, and I'm not saying I'm in favor of what Mr. Strong decided, I'm just saying that from a if you are used to a payback analysis, I think it's a pretty safe statement to say that in terms of public money, the payback is quite lousy, and then there's clearly not enough private money coming in, and that's where I'm coming from, number one. Number two, I'm very proud to say that we are an impact investor, meaning that we are going to places which is not obvious to go, and to do things which are not obvious to do, i.e. going not just into DRC, but investing 20 million into agro-pharma company in the Kivu is not the most obvious, riskless type of environment. But we do it because that's what I understand as impact investments. You could debate that, in my case, if you invest into real estate in Kenya, this is not about impact investment, this is about investments. If you're doing fintech in Ghana, God bless you, and it needs to be done, but it is basically investments. This being said, any private investment in Africa is welcome because what Africa needs is jobs. So that's just a quick introduction. Our company, so my background is food. I worked 30 years in the food industry. I was 25 years with Nestle. I managed Nestle operation in places like China for 15 years and Pakistan and other exotic places, including Switzerland. And then I moved my complete horizons to an NGO. I manage a hospital ship called Mercy Ships, which sail around Africa. We lived on board the ship with my family. I'm not smart enough to be a doctor, but I was tough enough to manage doctors, which is an interesting challenge. And then for the last 8 years, we've been living in Africa, where I grew up, by the way, but basically getting investors from Switzerland, mostly family offices, and investing into processing companies in Africa. I'm a big, big fan of belief that Africa needs an industrial revolution. The biggest issue in Africa, to me, is the lack of local processing. The overall macro model has actually not changed for the last 500 years. The only thing was changed is that we as Europeans used to go there and steal things, and now we pay for it. Okay, substantial improvement, but the model has not changed. We're still buying raw material and basically resending them or reselling them finished product. Example of the company we're dealing with, so we bought this company called Pharmakina, which is the world leader in transforming quinine. Quinine is the original medicine against malaria. Just as a background, malaria today kills every year, according to WHO, 600,000 to 800,000 people in Africa. 90% are children below the age of 5. And the amount is same, and very little is being done from a research and from a development point of view. This company is, quinine comes from a tree, and it happens that 90% of the worldwide tree population happens to be in the Kivu. So very, almost I would say monopoly of this raw material, which is being used as a medicine to cure malaria. So we invested into this company, we bought the majority, most of us being operators, so we know one or two things about managing these kind of tough companies. And then I think talking about supply chain, the first thing I'd like to say is in Africa, most people make a mistake in investing only in a factory, not into the supply. Building a factory is the easy part. Many people think it's tough. It's not that tough. What is tough is how can you guarantee a sustainable supply into your factory 12 months a year at a volume, value, quantity, quality level 12 months a year. So every different industry has different ratio. I have a very simple ratio, which is for every 3 million you invest into a factory, as in CapEx, you have to invest 1 million into your supply. So example, this company in the Kivu, we are producing and giving to our thousands of farmers 5 million trees a year. We have our own in vitro lab, we have our own industrial nurseries, and etc. So we have our own model farms, we have our own research center from an agro in terms of disease resistant, etc. So don't just look at your factory, look at your supply and invest into your supply, feeding into your factory. And frankly, that's one of the reasons, I can talk openly now, I left them, companies like Nestle, if you look at or other multinationals, what they're doing in Africa, with the exceptions of 1 to maybe 3 countries, they're not so strong because they don't invest, they're not allowed by the way, but anyway, they don't invest enough into the suppliers. And this is really what is needed. That's it. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's finish.
Okay, we have a lot of people on the stage. Thank you so much, Ola. Next, we're supposed to move to Greg Valerie. He's the CEO of Peace Gold. They're really pioneering peace minerals. I was with him yesterday, so he is in the country, but I don't know what happened on his way. So we'll move on in the interest of time. If he will not make it, he will be with us in the afternoon where we have a session on peace as a precondition for sustainable development. So we'll move on to Mr. Matthew Hall from La Costa. Matthew, you can briefly introduce yourself and then your company.
So very different. We are Swiss and European based for the moment. We will move in other countries as we go. La Costa basically took the challenge over 20 years ago when our founders did their PhD to take lobsters, which are more or less dying around the world, and to solve the problem of breeding them, growing them, to be able to eat them one day without depleting the sea, and then maybe get more out of it than that. And over time, as things worked very well, those animals grow quite fast. They can live for hundreds of years. And as you may know, they lose their shells. Like snakes, insects, crustaceans lose their skin to grow. And to be able to move the company faster and have more profits sustainably wise, they discovered that you can extract different polymers from those shells that we can sell to the pharma industry. So the company today is for the moment not feeding anyone yet. And we are focusing first on developing a product which is with way more added value here and then for other species around the world, because we use the Mediterranean lobster, which is the big red one that you might have seen in restaurants. But there are animals that live all around the world and are being depleted all around the world.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about how La Costa's aquaculture model demonstrates sustainability or sustainable supply chain design in food systems?
Yeah, so basically today, those animals sort of don't exist anymore. There's very little. If you are to ever eat one, you think they are more or less 20 centimeters long. A natural adult should be 3 to 4 kilos and about half a meter long, if there was not fished as much as we do today for the food industry. So the whole goal is to be able to grow them 100% on land, of course taking water out of the sea and putting it back, without causing any pollution and being fully sustainable. We are doing this here today, and then is to move that supply chain to other countries, most of them tropical, where they can then rely on that food supply instead of taking mangroves out of the earth to grow shrimps and other less profitable foods.
Okay. What technical or policy barriers remain for scaling sustainable seafood in a global market from your experience?
That's an interesting one.
Because since we have a lot of impact investors in the panel, we can also say, how do you think that impact investors can help de-risk innovation in your sector?
Yeah, so they go a bit together. So basically what's happening, I think also with any other impact investing, is the time scale. So you cannot develop sustainable aquaculture in 1, 2, 3 years. This is something that takes time and patience. And so basically a lot of the fast-paced normal investor models where you want a 10x feedback in 5, 10 years maximum don't apply. And so there mainly is having investors that follow us that are patient and see things in the long run. And also taking maybe the example of Switzerland where for some things we do things well, having a stable environment regulatory-wise. We've worked with a few other countries already, and when regulations change or government change every 3 years and everything has to be started again, it doesn't really come on.
Okay, maybe last question from my side, since we have a lot of investors here on the platform. What type of finance or partnership are most catalytic for scaling responsible aquaculture? You mentioned a little bit about patience capital, if you want to elaborate a little bit more on that.
I think there's two main ones. One is having some backing of the state. We often use it more as a guarantee with the investors, just because on the short run we won't be profitable straight away. Which was also why we switched from purely food to much higher value products, which are the polymers we sell to the pharma industry, because it allows us to grow and scale first and then deploy the technology in a bigger market where you will have lower feedback and lower income along the way, but it will take more time to scale. And the other one for the investors is believing in those type of companies. We've talked, I think, since 2023, when the stock market shot up and only interest rates went up and investors more or less disappeared, as they could invest somewhere else and get money not for free, but needy, while leaving it at the bank. And I think we, maybe 200 to 300 of them, at least. And we always get the same reply, which is, show us that you can sell what you have and get the money tomorrow. And we reply that we have clients, but the clients want us to be consistent, viable, and be able to provide them products for 10 to 20 years. So it's a bit of a catch-22 between the fast return awaited from part of the investment community and the long-term scale that our clients require. Because if a pharma company develops medicine, she wants a 20-year supply chain, which is guaranteed, as you were saying earlier, maybe for 12 months in your case. And we have to be able to guarantee that before they will buy anything.
Thank you very much, Matthew. As I said before, the CEO of Peace Gold, I was with him yesterday in Geneva, so he's in the country. I don't know what happened, but for those who travel all the way to Busan to hear him speak, he will be on another panel this afternoon, so all is not lost. So thank you to our corporate speakers for those powerful pitches. We now move to the catalyzers of supply chains, the organization that provide the enabling mechanisms and the financial innovations to bridge the gap between promising business models, as we heard today, and the capital that they need to grow. And again, as I said, you'll find full profiles on your own platform behind me. First, we welcome Julie Görig from the Catalytic Finance Foundation, who will introduce the Canopy Trust Facility, a mechanism designed to unlock conservation and climate-smart investment in the Congo Basin and beyond. Julie, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for having me. So maybe to go back quickly on what Catalytic Finance Foundation does. So we are a Geneva-based foundation. We are a non-profit, and that's quite crucial. And we basically design and operate blended finance vehicles and solutions for climate. So we have a various range of programs, mostly in emerging countries, ranging from e-buses to waste management to sustainable infrastructure, mostly renewables, and port decarbonization, and so on. And the program I'm overseeing is named Canopy Trust. So what we do is we focus strictly on the 6 Congo Basin countries, so these are the two Congos, Central African Republic, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, and Cameroon, to preserve and conserve forests. So how do we do this? We have three main activities, which are first community-based, so we help communities and incentivize them to preserve the forests. So that's talking of the supply, what Roland was mentioning before, to be sure that an enabling ecosystem exists on the ground. Then the second activity is we act at project level. So we support projects conserving and preserving forests. This can be sustainable agriculture, sustainable forestry, renewables, but small scale, think like clean cooking, or every kind of activities that will consist of an economic alternative to cutting down forests or communities, like ecotourism. So we support this project through technical assistance or through direct investment. And the third activity we do is we act at the fund level, playing a bit the role of an LP, investing into funds that have the same mandate we do, investing in Central African forests.
So, Julie, how can, you've already alluded to that, but how can catalytic capital and blended finance unlock supply chain innovation and at scale?
So, the three activities I've mentioned to you before, we really see this as a continuum. So first, we invest into communities, and this is crucial. One of the main drivers of deforestation are actually slash and burn agriculture and charcoal cooking. So acting at community level to incentivize this community to preserve the forest. And this is an externality. We support them and we give them payments for this this activity they do preserving the forest that will be of interest to all of us. So this is crucial to, again, preserve the environment, creating an enabling environment for projects to plug in. Then the second part of this continuum is to scale up projects. So what we do is projects that are not mature enough, we give them technical assistance to help them become bankable. And once they have reached this critical stage, then we invest in the most promising projects. And eventually, because the aim is us not being needed anymore, we transfer these projects to the funds. Because really our DNA is being catalytic and to attract private finance into where they would not go traditionally because of the de-risking we do, scaling this project up, and then traditional finance can take the lead and invest in this project. As Roland was mentioning, we crucially need private capital, and that's what we try to achieve doing this continuum. So we have various instruments, we have grants. At technical assistance level, we give grants to projects. Then we have, when we decide to invest in the project that are a bit more mature, we have equity, debt. We really try to tailor the kind of instruments to the project needs. We assess the balance sheet, we see if the project is ready enough. Maybe it needs asset financing, maybe it needs us to be sitting on the project to have equity and to sit on the board, or maybe it's something else. And then, hopefully, the project becomes traditional finance ready, and we say to our investors, look, now we know that the project, we have worked with them, we have worked with them for 2-3 years, now you can invest in them, they really are ready for traditional finance. And that's again where we are catalytic, because the funds we invest in, we do this through junior tranches, and it can be funds that are already active in the Congo Basin. There are few of them, but they do exist, but that not invest for the moment in sustainable agriculture or forestry. Maybe they do fintech, maybe they do, and we are catalytic saying, look, we give you junior tranches, so this is cheap money, and you then will start investing in these risky sectors because of us, in sustainable agriculture, sustainable forestry, or etc. Or the other way around. We find all the investors that are active in sub-Saharan Africa, because usually when you ask people investing in sub-Saharan Africa, oh, where do you invest? They will tell you, well, Nigeria, well, Kenya, but mostly never in the Congo Basin. So then we say, okay, go in the Congo Basin, we help you, give you junior tranches, and now that's how we've been catalytic.
Thank you. Just quickly, if you can be very brief, since we do have two corporates operating in fragile context, what models have worked in terms of de-risking investment in fragile markets? Have you already been in fragile market? Very briefly.
Yes, so yes, as I was mentioning, it's really this continuum, like thinking of the whole supply chain, creating the enabling ecosystem, then scaling the project up. Technical assistance is crucial. I was at Building Virgins yesterday, and all the investors were saying a lot of projects are not investment ready, and what we need is you to help them scale up and reach this level where they can attract traditional finance. And then all the instruments I've mentioned before, really tailored to the project needs, because all of the projects don't need the same kind of financial support. And yeah, being on the ground and looking what project do you need at what level.
Okay. Thank you so much, Julie, for these catalytic perspectives. We now transition to the supply of capital itself, the impact investors. These are the partners who are not only bringing financing, but also strategic guidance and credibility, helping innovative supply chains scale sustainably. As always, as I said, you can explore their full strategies and track records through their AI agents on their own. Here, we'll just keep it short and let them speak directly. First, we were supposed to have had Sandrine Henson, Managing Director of EG Capital, but unfortunately she had a family issue back in Nairobi, so she can't be with you. But we are very fortunate to have Rosanne Valley with us, the CEO of AHL Venture Partners, who brings deep experience in mobilizing impact capital for high-growth African ventures, and will share perspective on what catalyzed successful collaboration between corporates and investors. So over to you, Rosanne, for a brief presentation of who you are.
Great, thank you, and thank you very much for joining the session today. Maybe I will share a little bit about myself and my background to contextualize kind of my contribution to this panel. I've spent the last 17 years investing in Africa. I've done everything from kind of larger private equity, venture, as well as private credit and fund-of-fund investing. I've spent the last 9 years based in Nairobi, Kenya, and before that in Mozambique. So I'm very focused on the how. How do you actually build businesses at scale that are having impact? And my fellow panelists alluded to the fact that one of the big challenges with impact investing in Africa today is that the returns have been very challenging. As an industry, I think we're having impact. I think there's a lot more to do in terms of demonstrating that impact and the comparability of impact. But one thing is for sure, the returns have been super challenging. So just a bit of context about myself and AHL, I manage a single family office strategy investing in Africa. We've got 100 million assets under management. And we went through a journey as AHL, focused actually a lot on the kind of more impact first investing. And I quickly realized when I took over the leadership, I got given the mandate from the family of them saying, look, we're done plugging loads of capital into this foundation. We need to find a sustainable way of investing in the region. And so we pivoted our strategy to be more commercial, to be honest, to be more disciplined, and to really index heavily on finding great teams, developing and growing scalable business models. So that is the kind of lens that I bring and the context. And so if I kind of just shift to the value chain perspective here, one of the interesting things about investing in Africa is that it is a very underdeveloped market. And so what we found over the last 17 years operating there is that you do have to heavily vertically integrate, but and there's very good reasons for that heavy vertical integration as businesses, because you have much more control over your end-to-end supply chain as a business. It's also because there is just not that many third-party service providers out there. So for example, we've got a business that was a solar home system financing company. They effectively produce their solar home system units, they distribute them, they finance them, they also have the call center, So it is a very complex business model that is fully end-to-end vertically integrated. And there's good reason. You can also mitigate certain FX exposures if you've got more control on your local production. But maybe what I'll focus on is that there's also lots of challenges with being vertically integrated. And one of them, and it's been touched upon for the need of blended capital, one of them is that it quickly erodes equity value because they're hugely capital consumptive business models. And the margins on these products are often not huge, and the affordability of our markets is not huge. And so if you're pumping huge amounts of capital into these businesses, because effectively they're building an end-to-end business model, you build a great business, but from an equity returns perspective, it is highly problematic. And again, that's kind of maybe one of the reasons why, especially private equity returns have been so challenging in our markets. It's also therefore though why blending and bringing in the right sources of capital at the right time are so critical. The other piece I would just highlight is complexity. So we had an investment in a pretty high profile asset in Kenya. For those of you who are familiar with the East African market, you'll probably guess which asset I'm talking about. But it managed to raise a lot of capital with a lot of VC backing. It took the view that it had to go into local agricultural production to shore up its value chain, and actually, again, what you were saying, to have control over that supply side. But the reality is it was a aggregation, distribution, logistics business. It was not a primary agriculture production business. So again, this kind of vertical integration approach can be super valuable, but it can also bring a lot of operational challenges that are really difficult. And so what increasingly, as our markets mature, especially as AHL, where we're sometimes on the board of these companies, we're often encouraging as a first approach to consider partnering with other ecosystem players before you really take the view that you have to vertically integrate. So I think my key message here is that huge need for vertical integration, lots of value, especially even from an impact perspective, but from the investor lens, it can sometimes be really challenging. And I do think it's one of the reasons why returns have been challenging in our ecosystem. And so there is definitely an increasing need for blending, but blending in a very thoughtful way that is in service to the commercial returns. Again, sometimes I find that the kind of blending is maybe too impact first, and so it's forcing a commercial company to emphasize on smallholder aggregation, which may make a lot of sense from an impact perspective, but maybe is not the optimal strategic move from a commercial perspective. Let me stop there.
Okay, thanks a lot, Rosanne. Just one question, one last question. You did emphasize the importance of partnership, since contrary to building bridges, we have a lot of representatives of the other pillars of the impact investing ecosystem, particularly the demand side. Could you say what role does a partnership with corporates or NGOs play in your investment strategy?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. We've actually, so we've largely shifted to more of a private credit strategy. As an aside, I think that is the right risk-return profile to deliver returns in an African context. Where we did a lot of equity investing, we did actually work with quite a lot of corporate venture teams, and we do have a number of assets, even with a pretty large Swiss company as a shareholder. My one comment is that I think it can be done super well, but I think Africa is often a non-core strategic market for global corporates. And so what you find is you experience cycles. So someone is really passionate about Africa and the potential, and they come to the region, they're like, well, can I do an investment? They become a key shareholder, and then something changes understandably, especially if these are listed large corporates at the holdco level, often in Europe or the global north. And honestly, Africa is a really challenging market, and it needs a very long-term time horizon perspective from an equity standpoint. And what we've seen is really, in the end, those corporates, after about 5 years, either kind of lose interest or there's a strategic shift that means that maybe it wasn't quite the right strategy or investment for them. So I think that the key message here is it needs to be corporates who really are taking a kind of 20-year time horizon strategically in the region. And we see, for example, a lot of the telcos, banking partners, that they're really doubling down and investing heavily in the region. We've done investments with 2 actually FMCG businesses, and actually in the long term it wasn't a fit. It wasn't the right partnership.
Okay. Thank you so much, Simon. And finally, we'll hear from Florian Kemmerich, co-founder and managing partner of Human Planet, who brings a wealth of experience across the impact ecosystem. Florian will also close our session afterwards with a provocative talk, but let's just, now he'll be wearing his impact investing hat. So, Florian, if you could briefly introduce yourself. You have his CV on your own platform, so because he has a very long one, but go ahead.
No, thank you, Christian, and I feel amongst kindred spirits here, really different angles, looking at different things, and I've suffered over a decade trying to do impact investing, impact first investing in emerging markets, in over 100 companies, equity and debt, and companies providing services to this rural population, and a lot, of course, then the opposite is also smaller farming. And very quickly, it took me some time to understand what has actually happened, because it wasn't just the African market, or the legacy of the history, but also it was COVID, huge impact. Inflation, huge impact. Supply chain, huge impact. Yeah, interest rates up, huge impact. And suddenly we're sitting there with funds, where no longer were market returns. We had a hard time to deliver, all doing small tickets, trying to go scale into, and we couldn't. So at the end, we exited that at the asset manager to a larger group, hoping that they can take this forward. And of course, now you have other factors coming in, like ODA money going down, USAID going bust, and other things, which has some positive effects, as you mentioned, because you, in a sense. So my credo is actually, you need to give a person a fish to sustain life. And you were talking about continuum of care, also you mentioned that. To then teach a person how to fish, but then invest eventually in the fishing business. And this is really the continuum of care we're trying. So in today's life with Human Planet, we basically try to design solutions on the additionality and the intentionality of capital, which is impact investing. Very often you say commercial impact investing if there is no additionality, because other than anyone can invest, it's not really impact investing, which is great, ESG. But so that's one, and we collaborate and we work with corporates a lot. We work with institutional investors, but we also work with NGOs and multilaterals, and really on all shades of gray between the non-for-profit and for-profit space. So whether this is design of endowment funds, results-based finance, which is still depleting, but only on the impact side. We've done over 20 impact bonds, humanitarian impact bonds, refugee impact bonds in very fragile settings also. We do blended finance, we do equity, and we do debt. What we try to do is to adjust risk, return, reward, and create solutions so that the continuum of care is actually happening. Because typically post-COVID, you do the case, everybody moves to debt, which is much easier to have returns. And you mentioned the problem is equity, which it is, but again, it's very hard to solve those. So the intention is actually try to do partnerships. It's not me, myself, and I. It's not my strategy, but a solution on that to find solutions so that money can flow, and you need a non-for-profit angle to de-risk the for-profit side. But you can also go stage-wise. you know, from giving, teaching to investing in the fishing business.
Okay, thanks a lot, Brian. So, first question, from your very rich investor experience and from the ecosystem lens, what are the key ingredients that make supply chain ventures attractive to blended capital?
So the key ingredient is it should be cost effective, it should provide additional value, and it should have a benefit financially for everybody involved, and ideally it should be sustainable. And that is Santa Claus wish list, because the reality is different. And depending who you talk to, yeah, the point is a different one. So one of the issues is, for example, if you talk to the off-taker, like Nestle, who's not investing in a smallholder farm, because it's too risky. Risk-reward return is off the chart. How can I do this? Yeah, and so this is where actually, in order to have a continuum of care, you need to talk and bring in several people in, or several organizations in, which goes from the work on the ground. Yeah, you need some technical assistance, you need to bring the project to be investable, like discussed at building bridges. So those are the things which makes it complex, but you need to align the interest, not thinking in silos. Yeah, I'm the development person and I only want to help. Yeah, and the other says, I only want to have returns, but you need to bridge the gap.
Okay. Yeah, very insightful indeed. How is AI and digitalization changing the way investors assess supply chain risk and opportunity?
Okay, yeah. Pandora's box. So we heard before also on AI. Let's say, for me, AI, the blessing of AI is you can automate things. The more complex it is, the more metrics you have to measure, the better actually AI works. That only doesn't work on my company, because we have my company, we flipped my entire company, and it's run on agentic AI and back to back. Yeah, so we get leaner, faster, and we can model things through with 15 years of history of many, many projects done, because you can pull all of that in to really create and innovate. So that's just one side. But so therefore, my hope is investments, especially in impact investing, have been penalized by EU taxonomy. Because the cost of the burden is higher. SFDR, and you have to prove and approve. If you don't do, you can do what Amundi did, you just get out of the chapter 8 and 9, yeah, and still do what you do, because then you don't have the burden. So the problem was the cost of dealing with it. And I believe that AI, the automation of technology, hopefully can flip this, where measurement of impact is easier, yeah, and it's more real time, where the costs go down so that we're actually able to provide market returns, not being punished. Yeah, and those are the parts where I believe, and this is now looking at supply chain overall, that you can trace and track, maybe in a blockchain in the future, which certain things are happening, by the in Congo, some examples even from the mines, on the mining side, trying to trace a project from A to Z, who gets what, is the wealth being transferred, or ripping off people, that's where I believe that technology hopefully is a blessing, because it resolves access and affordability.
Okay, thank you so much, Goya. And thank you to all of our speakers for those insightful contributions. So now we move into the interactive part of the session. This is where we open up the floor up to you, the audience. And here's how it will work. Any questions that you have already submitted digitally through the Rion have been captured and clustered. And during the segment, we'll highlight a few of those questions. If there are any, Eve, can you check, please, if there are anyone who has asked questions there? And at the same time, Rion has already started mapping pilot partnership canvases, identifying where supply and demand of captured innovation and partnership may align. So our goal is not just Q&A, but is to surface the very first building blocks of collaboration. So we will highlight at the end, during the outcome session this afternoon, if there's any pilot canvases or examples of AI-enabled matchmaking during this session. So, Frederica, you have the microphone. Anyone want to ask a question? Please, no long talks, so everyone get a chance to ask questions. Just your name and institution and the question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Christoph Zuckerberger, Geneva, Professor of Ethics. And in microfinance, I have a question to you. It's challenging. I always wonder if we do not have to change the mindset that this expectation of 6, 8, 10% return on investment is the benchmark, and then all what you say with 1 or 2% is not working. But the mindset, I remembered 20 years ago already, a famous entrepreneur of a big company in Switzerland said, forget about it, long term we can have 2 to 3%, but not more. That's an industrialist who said that, not a philanthropist or somebody or a stock market, a Wall Street investor. So how do you change this mindset, you know? Of course we know return on investment, for example, the pension funds, they say we have by law 4%, that's the compulsory by law. So how do you deal with that?
Thank you for your question. I'm in a lucky seat here because I have a chance of, our donors are quite non-exigent, and we are non-profit, so every money we invest, we require return on investment, but all the proceeds we make, we reinvest in the programs. And we are very patient investors, meaning we don't, we have requirements for return on investment, obviously, but there's no definitive figure. We don't have this 6 or 7% obligation. And then if in the end the project doesn't make return, well, that's it. We just have lost the money, and that's it. So it's a bit a specific position because of our donors' mandate. But then to your question, I think that how we put our piece in the puzzle is that where we invest junior tranches in impact funds, traditional impact funds, we help them lowering the expectations, meaning that they will still invest in bankable project and ask for returns, because that's how finance work. And that's also a good incentive to give to project. You don't want project to living on grants eternally, that's really not sustainable. But they can, with our help of our money being a bit cheaper, they can be more patient and invest with longer terms and with lower expectations, because we come with this money that is called junior capital. So, but I don't know if my other colleagues want to.
Maybe for her also, for you, you can also answer from Nairobi perspective.
I don't know. I'm kind of confused, if I'm honest, in that it's really difficult, because on the one hand I feel like I want to promote fully risk-adjusted returns, but it's really hard to achieve in our markets. But I do think that there is a perceived risk in our part of the world that I do think if there is a way through trust, and I am excited about the panel this morning. I really think that one of the big challenges with impact investing in Africa is that everyone says they're having impact, but it's very varying, right? Like some are very impact first, others are less impactful. So I think to the extent we can price in, or at least really articulate the level and depth and breadth and type of impacts we're having, then at least people can better discern where they want to allocate and what, if any, discount they might take on return for impact. But then I also think it's about transparency. We are doing, on the whole, fully senior secured lending to profitable at-scale businesses that are hedged across multiple markets in resilient business models. These are businesses we've been working with for years. I actually think it's pretty de-risked. Our whole team is in Kenya. You know, we're a board observer or like super actively involved with these companies. The challenge I have is when I come to, let's say, Geneva, and I say this, a lot of people say, oh my goodness, this is way too risky. So the fact that we're delivering net 8, 9, 10 still feels that compared to like global fixed income asset allocation in the US, it feels a lot riskier relative to return. But there is some truth in that, but I also think it's also a perception issue. So I do hope, with echoing what the panel was saying this morning and what Florian was just saying, that with more data and transparency and more kind of benchmarking of both the returns but also the impact, we can try and have more nuanced conversations rather than this just kind of, I need 10 net return for me to even consider, because that's a bit of a blunt conversation, and it's really hard then to kind of move the conversation forward.
Yeah, okay,
So thank you for the question, because I think this is a very, very key question, which is often, frankly, put under the carpet. Just go back to, I fully agree 100% to what has been said so far. One quick trick maybe for Roseanne, when I have exactly the same kind of discussions with many people, my provocative question is always, okay, you're talking about risk and country and so on. How much have you invested into Credit Suisse? Okay, because Credit Suisse, as far as I know, had a higher trust level than even Nestle or Roche. And look at what happened when you have incompetent crooks, many of them with a Swiss passport, going to the same university as many of us went to, and look what they did. So, the human heart, my conclusion is the human heart, as my pastor's father said, is the same everywhere. But regarding, I think to me the key question, and there was an article in Le Temps recently which summarized that, is the speech or the promise, I think the false promise of many up to recently, to say impact investments, basically you can save the world and become rich doing it, is a bunch of, excuse my language, horse shit. Because that's just, with a very few exceptions, there are exceptions, but basically I often say doing good has a cost. It's basic philosophy. You want to do good, it has a cost. When you need to build a supply chain, it costs money. And here you just call Cargill or Dreyfus, and then you get your raw material like this. When you need to build it, it will cost. When you want to expand medical insurance to the family, which is not compulsory, it has cost. So, for example, I believe impact investment, I like to say, we are about optimizing profit and maximizing impact. Optimizing profit is a weighted average between maximizing and minimizing. That's optimized. Interestingly enough, again, we really need to talk, because I'm just having some kind of, very interesting conversations, because we also believe it's about between 8 to 10%. This is quite good, So, but let's not promise people, manage expectation, as it was said. You're not going to become rich saving the world. You're going to get decent return, and by the way, saving lives. Somebody said a bit earlier, by the way, Meder, who I have a lot of admiration for, is not the only one to save lives. We are saving lives as well. Okay, doing impact investment in Africa saves lives.
Okay, thanks a lot. I need to ask the audience, as well as the speakers on the panel, on the platform, for your indulgence. As I mentioned before, we did have a speaker who traveled all the way from Eastern DRC, the Uturi province, via Newcastle and Amsterdam, and he came here. He will never get lost in the forest in DRC, but he got lost in his campus. So since we have a very time schedule, Greg, I'll give you the elevator pitch, 1 minute, to just pitch who you are, and I'll ask you a couple of questions. Okay. And then Florian will end up our session.
Yeah, thank you. I do apologise for being horrendously late, but it's fashionable these days. So, so just to give you a 1 minute pitch on Peace Gold. For 10 years we've been working in Ituri province, which obviously is a highly conflicted, historically highly conflicted, currently highly conflicted part of Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, working with peace-building organizations. And those peace-building organizations had a basic problem. How do we fund what we're doing in terms of peace-building and conflict resolution? They were demobilizing militia, men, women, children, very effectively. Everybody in that part of the world understands gold. It's like, when you cut them, they bleed red and gold. And we began the process of putting them into cooperatives, people that historically would have been in conflict, placing them into cooperatives, getting them mining, building out a supply chain. My background for 35 years now nearly has been with jewelry supply chains from mines, artisanal mines, all the way through to finished products. So we know how to build supply chains. Fair trade certification, for example, is one of the things which I was involved with from the beginning. And for us, peace gold is exactly what it is. We should move. Part of the problem is the narrative. We talk about de-risking, we talk about conflict gold, we talk about maximizing impact. We don't talk about peace gold, we don't talk about circular economies, we don't talk about value going back into the ground. In a country like the DRC, where you have so much mineral wealth, it's not just about corruption, it's about the economic models which serve the people and communities, not the markets. So we've created a circular economy. We have 11 cooperatives, 20,000 people that we work with. We produce over 50 kilos of gold per month. We can do a fully traceable, GPS located mine through to finished ring option, excellent due diligence. We can tick all of the big box hurdles which the world creates around these problems. Part of the big problem is there's so much due diligence, how can anybody on the ground access it? You know, it's put together by Harvard educated people, and then people that aren't Harvard educated are supposed to decipher it in a language which they don't understand. This is the prejudice which is latent in our assumptions about responsibility. So Peace Gold has essentially worked for 10 years on the ground with civil society organisations, and we're now flipping the whole model from a non-profit, you know, where the whole thing drops off the end after 5 years and everybody goes back to day one and has to start all over again. We have to cut the charity stuff out of this, but what we don't need is linear markets. We need circular markets, circular economies, where the value chain returns to the ground to build out the peace, the development, the conflict resolution, etc., etc., etc. So the social impact is critical, but we can fund it from a product like gold. But it's a no-brainer. So we have to move from conflict gold to peace gold, where the value of the gold builds peace, not fuels conflict.
As you can hear, that Greg has been a number of years in DRC, where 1 minute, Congolese minutes is not 1 Swiss minute, but it's a fantastic business model, and I wanted you to hear him. So, Greg, if you can just spend a few seconds answering that question, what kind of capital would allow Peace Gold to expand? What kind of capital you need to go to the next phase?
Well, we're at the process where we're fundraising at the moment to build out the model. So in order for us to get a strong, fully operational model, which includes compliance, social impact, staff, plant, licenses, basically put the whole piece together with a verifiable social impact and there's a return as well. You know, we're not asking people to invest blind. We're looking for $2 million US. And what that gets is a strong platform that is replicable across cooperatives. It gets our own concession. We're looking to get our own mining concession, which is typically not normal in a situation like ours. But the best way to replicate is through participation. You don't sit people down in a room and teach them like they're in school when you're a 45-year-old ex-combatant. You need to go to a working mine, see how it's done properly, and learn through participation, and you replicate through that methodology. We have provincial government on board, the DRC government, Ministry of Mines is on board. Like I say, we've got 11 cooperatives, and we have the ability to scale to 25. So for that amount of money, and I'll let you do the maths on your phone. You know, if you're doing 50 kilos of gold across 11 cooperatives on a month to 6 weekly basis, and we've got 4 buyers already, one of which is in Switzerland, we don't have a problem selling it. Nobody has a problem selling gold.
Okay,
it's an easy sell.
Thanks a lot, Greg. For those of you who got inspired by his words and the amazing thing he's doing, he, as I mentioned, he will be in a parallel session this afternoon where Greg can further elaborate. Thank you so much, Greg, for making it all the way to Busan. We are a bit behind schedule, so Greg has an AI agent, so you can communicate with him on your own platform, and you can come to his session. So now I'll give the word to Florian. He will spend, we only have 4 minutes, Florian, so we have to condense it in. He will talk about how to flip your organization with AI, reimagine expertise, delivery, and performance in an AI-first world. This is not just about technology, it's about how leaders and organizations can embrace AI to unlock human potential. Florian, if you can take the...
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Up here?
Yeah.
So, okay, 4 Swiss minutes, I try my best. The thing is here, and I'm not here to sell you something. I'm not here to tell you everything is beautiful, and I have the solutions for you. I just want to share with you an experience I had the last 6 months. Because I took over a company which was not profitable, where the old model wouldn't change, wouldn't work anymore. Yeah, because we work between, as I said before, non-for-profit and for-profit space, and we serve these social enterprises and these NGOs and try to support them. And suddenly, of course, USAID collapse, yeah, ODA money going away, where you can have a lot of criticism whether soft power is good or bad, but just that's a fact, hitting the market we are servicing. On the other side, AI kicking in. And so basically we said, what do we do? And I decided to buy a company, loss-making, and to flip it around and just try. But a lot of people say, yeah, I don't know, and AI can do this, and I'm not sure. And I'm not a tech person like you would be. And I'm not looking about systems. I'm just saying, okay, how can I use what I get today, because it's available, and I can do this in an amazing way to flip the company. And to basically, within 3 months, we flipped the entire company. Now we're no longer based anywhere because the team is fully remote. We drove our costs down to 1/5 because the cost of doing or driving business, the overhead, is down, and it's really down only to value to the customer at a different price point, yeah, at a different speed, different complexity. Yeah, much more tailored, much faster, which is actually embraced by our clients. Because the work we do is not in the old way, you know, coming in, copying some, here replacing something. We have done so many different models on innovative finance, you know, from the really purely concessionary side to the more profit, and flip this around. So basically mapped our process, and we took what we had, and this is all evolving, and you cannot bet on something, and maybe in 2 months, there's something new there, but we're just embedding this one. Initially, I can tell you, I had a dizzy head. We lost some people with the old way of doing a project, 3 or 4 people, you serve the client, you go back, you do next here, you come back to do some here, you do some market research, and you come back. It's gone. Because we have senior people, we have a mid-level, and the rest is AI. Now people say, oh, and the juniors, you don't hire juniors. I don't know a senior person has to have no hair or gray hair to be senior, because AI caters information at a level which is really amazing. So therefore, my learning is also, if I embrace AI, it caters to me to innovate, to come up with new solutions and new things. And that is actually why I believe it's powerful, especially in the impact investing. We all are here because of a calling, with a vocation on a theory of change. Yeah, it might be smaller farmers, it might be nature-based solutions, it might be, you know, equity, it might be indigenous, whatever it is, you know, on the theory of change. So we have a calling, but the way we can now, at a higher speed, where the threshold is lower, I need less money to really innovate, is mind-blowing. I cannot say that I know everything, and I cannot say how it looks in 1 or 2 or 3 years. And I also clearly say that I have a lot of things where I'm concerned about where this whole thing goes in geopolitics. But I'm just looking at it in a pragmatic way, yeah, so that by flipping it, embracing what I have very quickly to do, that's the way which is served. And we even launched 10 AI agents to cater to NGOs, and we will launch for social enterprises, because we want to help, we want to plug in, we want to support. So those are my words and my sharing, not to sell you anything, but only to inspire you. Please keep going, keep focused, and let's try to think about how to take the cost of delivering impact investing down through technology, so that the money, and most of the money, is actually doing something on the ground and hitting the beneficiary, yeah, not nicely paid people traveling around the world to help the poor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dorian, for these inspiring keynotes on reimagining organizations in an AI-first world. This concludes our session on innovative supply chains. I want to sincerely thank all of our speakers, as well as the audience here in the room, as well as those using the Rion platform. Let's carry this insight forward into the rest of the summit, especially into the outcome sessions later today, where we will consolidate some of the key takeaways. I will ask maybe the speakers to come up here. We will take a group photo before we hand over to the next session that Svetlana Banerjee will be responsible for. Yes.